Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome today to Hire, Don't Adopt, a presentation on will a hiring mistake harm your practice? Today's presentation is presented by Attorney and Practice Advisor Steve Riley. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Atticus, in case you're not familiar with us. Atticus was founded in 1989 to provide some in-depth, ongoing support and accountability programs for lawyers and law firms. We like to help you increase your gross revenues, your personal incomes, but we also like to help you reduce your stress and the number of hours that you spend in the office. We want you to have a greater sense of career and life satisfaction and allow more time for your family and personal interests. My name is Mike Wells, and I'll be the organizer for today's presentation, so I'll be behind the scenes. Today's presenter is Steve Riley. Steve is an attorney and practice advisor with Atticus. He helps attorneys grow practices and increase revenues, and he focuses on a limited number of top producing attorneys committed to taking their practices to new levels of excellence, profit, and personal success. Steve has been practicing for over 20 years as an attorney, and he has been coaching attorneys for nearly as long as well with Atticus. You may have heard of some of the workshops that he has created with Atticus, including the Double Your Revenue workshop, which has been featured in Lawyers Weekly. So without further ado, here is Steve.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending where you're at in the country. We have a large group today, so we'll do our best to stay on point, but this is, interestingly enough, one of my favorite topics to talk to lawyers about. So why are we talking about hiring and managing? So we'll talk a little bit today about hiring, and we'll talk a little bit about managing. Mike, who is helping, who's running the webinar as the organizer today, is also a project manager at Atticus. And Mike and I have had a long-standing relationship. And when we're trying to put together this presentation, we probably identified 20 hiring and managing mistakes that we thought were crucial. Then we negotiated down to 10, and today we're really going to try and drill down on what I consider 5 core ones, because we only have an hour together. And if you were one of our group programs, we would spend a lot more time and a lot more in depth on strategies to work through these mistakes. But why are we doing this, of all things, and why are we doing this? And if you're a solo or small firm attorney, this is usually the big secret to growth that nobody wants to talk about. No one wants to talk about this because it's not very sexy. It's not very exciting. We can talk about websites, marketing, all the really cool stuff and stuff that I love to talk about and stuff that we're brilliant at doing. But this is the blind spot in most practices. This is the blind spot where growth will be stunted. Growth will not occur because this is totally ignored or not seen. And when I say a blind spot, it doesn't even occur to the lawyer that this could be the growth area or the thing that's holding them back. So if you're a solo, small firm attorney and you want to grow your practice, you really need to have 4 terrific business skills. And we call those the 4 cornerstones to practice growth. 1, you've got to have time management skills to help you improve focus. 2, you've got to have client development. Number 3, you've got to have cash flow and profitability. And number 4, which is last but not least, you've got to know how to recruit, hire well, train, then manage, and then ultimately lead your team. And that's where there's a tremendous amount of revenue growth in most firms. And a lot of lawyers really don't get this. And if you are a solo practitioner and you feel like you're running on a treadmill as fast as you can, and you're generating 60 to 70, 80% of the firm's revenue, I would assert this may be your blind spot, meaning that if you're the biggest revenue producer and you can't go on vacation for 2 weeks, if you can't leave the office for 3 days and not check your email, and I say 3 days, I mean 3 work days, like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then take the weekend off. If you can't do that without checking your email and dealing with phone calls, then this webinar is for you, because it really tells me that you have not put together that championship team. You have not put together a support team that allows you to do certain things. It allows you to be free from your practice. If you're taking that many phone calls and responding to those emails, the practice owns You don't own the practice. So it's really a crucial component to thinking about the growth of your practice. So here's our topics for today. Number one, the biggest hiring and managing mistakes that lawyers make. Number two, our most important recommendation, which will come towards the end. And then homework. Yes, homework. And I am a big fan of really trying to communicate one concept to you. Learning and thinking alone is worthless. Action is where the value is at. So you can learn and think about stuff, and that makes you feel better. But it's a very sophisticated form of procrastination. You really don't learn until you start to do. For example, let's say you decide you want to learn how to ride a bike. You can read books on riding a bike. You can watch YouTube videos on riding bikes. You can listen to lectures on riding a bike, but you really won't get a sense of balance until you get on the bike and fall off and make some mistakes. And learning is really what we have to push you towards, and you won't want to learn until you commit to taking action. So if you are in one of our group programs, which some of you are, or if you're working with one of our practice advisors, which some of you are, if you're, I want you to take the homework that I assign you towards the end of the call, and I'll tell you what it is now, and then I'll tell you it again. You're going to talk about the homework that you're going to share with your coach or your practice advisor is going to be, have you adopted someone on your team? And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. What's your plan to deal with the adoption? And number two, on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to rate your management score. Now, for fun, you can put that down now. You can say 10, I am an extraordinary manager. 1, yeah, I stink. 1 is I stink at it. And how you know you stink at it is that you avoid it. You don't want to manage people. There are a lot of lawyers who went into the practice of law to tremendously just avoid people, and then end up starting their own practice and realize they have to deal with people all the time. And you deal with people for 2 reasons. Number one, you have to deal with clients because that's the people that give you money. Number two, you have to deal with staff because those are the people that help you serve the clients. So if you think you're at a point where you just can't stand managing people, give yourself a 1. If you think you're extraordinary at it, give yourself a 10. And so somewhere on there might be a number for you, it might be a 3 or 4, but go ahead and score yourself now, and then I'm going to ask you to rescore yourself at the end of the call after we walk through the mistakes. And if you aren't working with a coach, if you're not in one of our programs, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to have one of our client service advisors call you and ask you the questions. Because if you don't have an accountability structure and someone following up with you, you will not make any form of change. You won't do it. It just won't happen. We have studies over and over, and we keep learning this more and more and more. If we don't have an accountability structure and it's something that's scary to us, we won't make a change. So I will do you a favor, and I'm going to have one of my client service advisors call you, and it will be either Jeff, Larry, or Daniel. They're remarkable guys. So if they call you, take their call. So great. So why? Why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about this? I'm going to hit you hard here. There's nothing more expensive to you probably in your practice than your team. And nothing costs you more than a bad employee, whether that's a bad hire on the front end or someone that is inside your practice draining you dry. Now here's my example. Let's just say, and this happens a lot, if lawyers, solo practitioners are usually pretty good at hiring legal assistants, paralegal, team leaders. They're usually good at it. Usually where they completely blow it is at hiring associates. And when they talk about hiring associates, usually what they do is they hire an associate because they like them and they're intellectually strong and they're, they did well at law school, and they don't really have a good framework for hiring associates. Now, nothing can cost you more money than a bad hire and a poor management structure. So here's our hypothetical here. In this case, we have a solo practitioner who hired Tom, and he's billing out at $300 an hour, and that's what our solo is billing out at. And he spends over 100 hours, which is a small amount of investment. That's a small amount of time in training Tom to be a good associate. Tom doesn't work out, you know, and basically we usually see this where the lawyer will wait 6 months to a year before firing a bad associate, which is terrible, because if we're paying that associate 70 grand a year and we've already invested $30,000 of our owner's time in training Tom, we've lost 100 grand at least in productivity and money out the door. So why are we hitting you hard? Because if you're great at marketing, and most marketers are really good at marketing, they cover up all their poor management sins by over marketing and marketing more. If you don't appreciate, or if you don't take a moment and look at this, you'll never really appreciate how expensive a bad hire or a bad employee can be. Another way of looking at this is if you've got a bad employee currently and they're costing you productivity, you may want to just do some math. What are they costing you? Figure it out, write it out, do the math. I always get a big charge out of whenever I do workshops and public speaking, when we're doing a bar association conference, or doing an association conference, and I'll have lawyers come up to me and they'll say something like this: I really want to work with your company, I really want to work with Atticus, but I can't afford you right now. And I usually say, yes, you can, I know you can. And they're like, no, I can't, you don't understand, I'm not making that much money, I'm struggling financially. And I usually say, no, all we're going to do is ask you to reallocate money you're already spending. And they say, look at me always kind of funny, like, what do you mean? Well, you're probably doing some dumb things, like right now you have some bad employees, you've made some poor marketing decisions, and you're investing into things that aren't working. All we're asking you to do is take that money from the dumb things that you're doing and reinvest them in things that we know that work. So what I'm going to do is walk you through some of the things that we know that don't work, so you can hopefully take that money and reinvest them in something that does work. Because we know a bad hire or a bad employee is going to be just like burning money. And the question becomes, how much do you want to lose and how long do you want to lose it? The first thing from a hiring perspective is the biggest mistake you make long term is relying on the same old hiring methods that you've used for years. And if you're not considering that, if you're not looking at ways of innovating how you recruit, train, and manage people, you're going to continue to waste money and spend money that you could be reallocating in other directions. One of the things is that we see lawyers do a lot is they'll find somebody that's not a good fit or is not a good employee currently, and they try and move them around to find a good place for them in the firm. And they try and find a way of parking them so they keep them out of the way. And they say, well, this person's not so good, so I think I'll put them in the back of the firm where they don't have to deal with clients. Look, everyone in your firm has to contribute to the firm's profitability. They have a measurable impact on your firm. And they will have a measurable impact on your ability to compete, your ability to maintain high client standards, and ultimately to make your clients happy, to send you more clients. And you really have to shift your thinking about this, that in today's economy, you've got to run your firm lean, and you want to have as few layers of management and bureaucracy as you can. We can't have people in your firm just because they have potential. They have to produce revenue, they have to produce results for you. And if you're not clear about that, then you're going to cost yourself time and money cost yourself a lot of time and a lot of money. In addition, it's really remarkable to me that how many times I hear from lawyers that their staff is fighting them on changes in technology. Nothing is ripping through our industry quicker and more effectively than technology. About 5-6 years ago, I did a presentation about the five predictions that will impact the legal industry the most over the next 10 to 15 years. And one of the predictions I made was legal clinics inside of Walmarts. And I got a lot of chuckles from the audience, and I was like, no, I'm really serious. You're going to see legal clinics inside of Walmarts. You're probably going to see them in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know if all of you caught it in the ABA this month. There is an article about the first legal clinics opening up in the United States inside of Walmarts. They've already been opened up inside of Walmarts in Canada over the past couple of years. So you're going to see changes. If you have staff that's going to fight you on changes, you're going to either have to retrain them, explain to them why we've got to learn, to make improvements, innovations inside the practice. Otherwise, they're going to hold you back, and you're going to have to get them out of the practice. You're going to have to find a way for them to gunk up someone else's practice rather than yours. So just think about it from this way. As you look at this, you have a yin and yang inside your practice. There's two things that you have to balance at all times. To grow a practice, you must keep all the elements of your marketing moving. But to make the practice profitable, you have to equally run it well. And this is, like I said before, where I see a lot of lawyers get confused, and they spend a lot of time and effort just on marketing, and all their marketing success covers up all their management sins. The highly profitable practices are where someone markets well and manages well. And these are skills, both marketing skills and management skills can be learned. Terrific. So with that, let's dive into mistake number one. Number one is investing all of your, meaning you the lawyer, all of your training dollars and time into you becoming a better lawyer. Look, if you've been practicing more than 10 years and you are a decent practitioner, not a phenomenal practitioner, just decent, you're pretty much as good as you're going to get as a lawyer. Anything else after about 10 years worth of practice is nuance upon nuance, and your clients can't tell nuance. Quite frankly, most of the judges can't tell nuance, and quite frankly, the opposing counsel, Lord knows they can't tell nuance. So if you're that good of a practitioner to actually grow your top line and bottom line, becoming a better lawyer after about a decade has a diminishing rate of return. So you really have to have a key shift. So if you're an elder law lawyer, you really are going to shift your view to more of an entrepreneurial view, to saying, okay, not only am I an elder law lawyer, but I'm an entrepreneur who owns an elder law business. To do that, you have to kind of shift your perspective. Am I working from the lawyer perspective or the entrepreneur perspective? Now, here's typically what I see in the marketplace. If I ask a lawyer, if I say, show me how much money you spent in the past year out of your budget on improving your practice, here's usually what I see. 95% of their dollars is invested in CLE programs that are on legal technical improvements. Maybe 5% is invested in something else that might make their practice better. My experience is that it's a terrible paradigm to operate from, because that is a lawyer paradigm that tells me that you're looking at your practice as a lawyer. If you're an entrepreneur who owns a business, you're probably going to see the money allocated this way. So you'll see their time and money allocated differently. A quarter will be on improving CLE. Another quarter will be invested in improving their management and training skills. Now, this is important. You got to get this. This is a skill. It's something that you learn, no different than learning how to do a hearing, doing a trial, doing a depo. It's a skill, and it's something that you can improve over time. But if you want to grow your top line and you want to grow your bottom line and you want to take more time off, this is a major strategic leverage point in the growth of your practice. Number 3 is development and innovation. You're going to look at ways of improving systems and improving processes in your practice. And then a quarter of your time will be investing in marketing and sales. Now, how you invest in marketing and sales will shift over time based on your gross revenues, based on the amount of employees you have, based on your goals. So if you're a solo practitioner with 3 staff, you're going to market one way. If you're a solo practitioner and you have 100 employees, which some of our clients are at that point where they're solo owners of the firm, but they have 100, 150 employees. Their marketing and sales processes are radically different than the solo with 3 employees. So as your practice grows, your shift in marketing and sales will change. Your shift in management and training will change. But if you're looking at the number one mistake and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's my number one mistake? The number one mistake is continuing to grow your practice by trying to be a better and better and better lawyer and investing all your time into being a better and better lawyer. So right now you've got to ask yourself, what percentage of your time, and if you want to, you can just write it on scrap pieces of paper, hopefully whatever you're, whatever you're doing, but put down what percentage of time are you investing currently as an entrepreneur. And the easiest way to check this, by the way, after you write down your percentage, go back and look in your checkbook, in your firm's checkbook, and see how much money you've allocated to you as far as improving your management and training skills, as far as improving your development innovation, and as far as improving your marketing and legal sales. And see if that percentage matches up. If you say, wow, I spend 50% of my time as an entrepreneur and 50% of my time doing legal technical, and then you go back and realize that 100% of your dollars have been spent on CLE, I would say that your assessment that 50% is being spent on entrepreneur is delusion, because the dollars will follow the commitment. So if you're truly committed to being an entrepreneur and growing your business, you're going to reinvest those dollars differently. You're going to reinvest your time differently. You're going to reinvest your training differently. So I would match that up. But if you say, oh, no, I've got 50% of my time over here, but 100% of your dollars are going towards CLE, I would say you're delusional. You're not telling the truth. You're not telling the truth to yourself, and you're hurting yourself, and you're hurting the growth of your practice. All progress begins when you start to tell the truth about this type of stuff. And quite frankly, if you're spending your money that way, and you're, after you gut check it and go back and look, and you say, well, it's kind of not true, you might be just a little delusional there. I'm just saying. Mistake number 2, confusing skills with values. What do I mean? Well, sometimes when we're working with lawyers, we hear the following things. I am so frustrated with my staff. I don't know what to do. They don't show up on time. They don't listen to me. They don't listen to their supervisor. They don't listen to others. They don't care about the quality of their work. They don't have a great work ethic. They're, backstabbing. They're not great team leader. They're not helping each other's out. If that's what's going on, you have to ask yourself, is that a skill or a value? And my experience is those aren't skills. Those are values. So if you're looking to hire, you can teach people skills, but generally you can't teach them values. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can integrate and teach values and cultivate values in the culture of your organization, but the question then becomes, what do you hire for first, values or skills? And a lot of lawyers will hire, and I see this happen all the time with solo and small firms, will hire a very skillful associate or a very skillful paralegal. But the values that the paralegal or associate has don't line up with the values of the firm, and it doesn't work. And they can't figure out what's going on. Everybody's frustrated. Everyone's confused. And the lawyer will say things to me like, wow, they're a really good lawyer, but they just tick the team off. And I usually say because the values aren't the same. There's a misalignment of values. So when I say values, I mean things just very simple as, do they have integrity? Do they show up on time? Do they do what they say? Are they accountable? And are they coachable? There are a lot of lawyers that are not accountable and not coachable. And what I mean by that, if you give them feedback like, I don't think you're handling things with the staff well, or I don't think you handled that thing with the client well, or I don't think you did this well, and they push back and take no ownership over that mistake, they're not accountable. They're not open to growth. They got a fixed mindset. They're not looking to move beyond where they're at in life. Their work ethic. And this is something that we hear a lot of lawyers. I have the pleasure of working with lawyers that are very successful, and very strong partners, and they've grown up with a very strong work ethic, and they're hiring young lawyers that don't have the same work ethic. And some lawyers, although they're academically gifted, they have an entitlement attitude, and they come out of law school and say, okay, where's my BMW and where's my 100 grand a year? And you know, it's more of an entitlement attitude, and it's really getting more difficult to find somebody with a good work ethic. And then, are they positive? I was talking to one of my clients the other day who's got a very good firm, and he described one of his employees like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, because every time he talks to her, she's like, oh, you know, so-and-so's such a pain to work with, and they're so hard to deal with, and this is all hard, and this is everything. And he keeps trying to give her a pep talk, and I'm like, you know, she's Eeyore. You're not going to give Eeyore a pep talk. I don't think you're going to be able to change that value. If you can't convert her to being a positive contributing member of the team, and everywhere she shows up is negative, there's only one solution for that, man. You got to get rid of her. She's got to go. So what's a skill? Skills can be trained. How to provide great customer service to your clients is a skill. How to operate software, whether it be a document assembly program. Accounting accuracy, drafting, these things are skills. They can be taught and trained. So you want to be very clear in your mind when you're looking to hire or what you're looking to deal with. Is this a frustration because of a value issue? Or is this a skill issue? I am mad when my employees are late. That's a values judgment. They know how to tell time. Lord have mercy. You get so many smartphones and cell phones, you know, they have time everywhere. They know time, you know, they got iWatches. They know what the time is. They're making a value judgment by being late. That is not important to them to be on time. That's what that's about. So that's more of a values judgment than a skills issue. They know how to tell time. They know how to drive. They know how to show up somewhere on time if it's important to them. So if this is a values judgment, you've got to look at your frustrations as a manager and owner of a firm. What's going on? Is it a skill level or a value? A skill is the ability to do a task well, something that you can train for expertise. A particular ability like how to draft a trust or draft a complaint or draft interrogatories, or you know, how to talk to a client or do initial intake. Those are all things that can be taught. But a value, you know, what's an internal compass of what's good, right, and of importance is something that you're either going to coach them into by what you want them to live by inside your firm, or something they come with because their mom and dad taught them that. So you have to be clear when you're getting frustrated. You have to ask yourself as a manager, is this a skill? Can I teach them how to do this? Or is this a value? And is this a value conflict? Now it's possible. It is totally possible to communicate what's important to you. But the key issue is that you first have to clarify it in your own mind. And when I say clarify, I really think that you have to put it in writing. You can't say, well, these values are important to our firm, and you spout those off. They don't matter if you don't put them in writing. You have to, if you don't take the time to put them in writing, they just won't stick with your firm. Number two, you've got to educate them with examples. And number three, you've got to integrate into your performance reviews. You've got to tell your team how they're doing, living according to firm values. So we have given you a little bit of a gift. For those of you that are attending the webinar, you can download this worksheet. This is a worksheet that we use in the Practice Growth Program, worksheet that we've used in Dominate Your Market. But it's a worksheet designed for you to communicate to your team what values are important. Now, be careful here, especially you litigators. Be careful here. You want to have about 4 to 5, at the most 6 core values that are important to you. You can't end up with something that looks like the Constitution. You can't have like 26 core values and incorporate by reference, you know, the Bible or whatever it is important to you. You have to streamline these so you can communicate to your team what the core ones are. And the more specific you are, the better. So here's just a couple of examples. integrity and honesty, and you have to have examples of what that looks like. So it might be we talk straight to everyone, even when it's difficult. We do the right thing when nobody's looking, and we help others instead of always looking out for number one. Accountability, we follow through on our responsibilities. We always keep our promises. We're closing the loop. And work ethic, what that means here is that we work hard, we do our jobs, we pitch in to help others, and we don't believe in saying that's not my job if somebody needs help. And innovation, we're creative and open to changes that are for the good of our clients and customers. We solve problems. We don't adopt them and say, hey, look, that problem's just the way it is. We look for progress versus the status quo. Now, you can see this one is we've got scoring in the upper right-hand corner. So this is part of the module that I have for giving performance reviews. So you can see this is really designed to score somebody. And we just gave this one to you so you can get a framework around this if you want to use this. And improvement actions, so if you were to score yourself as a firm or score an employee, you can score like on 1 to 5 how they're doing or how you're doing. And if it's 4, or you can total up your current score is, and you can talk about what you can do to improvement or improve your score under this values. So I could spend probably 1 to 2 hours just talking about how to use this tool. For those of you that probably look at this and got a good glimpse of it and you understand what I mean by that, take it and run with it. Those of you that are struggling with this and you're working with one of our coaches, talk to one of our coaches. If you, when the CSA calls you, can also talk to the CSA. They're going to probably recommend an action out of this, which I'll talk about towards the end of the call. Okay, great. Mistake number 3, and this is probably my favorite, adopting your employees. What do I mean by adoption? Well, these are when you are at a point in your relationship with your employee where they're no longer an employee, but they're part of the family. And you can tell they're part of the family because there are 4 core elements of adoption. Number 1, you're afraid to confront or correct this employee. So if you're afraid to walk out to your legal assistant and say, look, show up on time. You're killing me here. Why can't you show up on time? Or if you're afraid to correct them on, look, you keep making the same mistake over and over and over. I don't know what to do, how to, stop this. What do we have to do? You're not conducting performance reviews because you're afraid to, or you're afraid to give negative feedback. That's an adoption. If you're afraid to give them correction, you are totally operating from a template of adoption. Number 3, if you've ever complained to your spouse, your partner, a colleague about the very things that you're afraid and probably never will confront the employee about, then you probably have adopted them. And number 4, and this is the worst, if you've ever complained to other staff members about this employee's performance or behavior, you've got an adoption. So the core element of this is that lawyers sometimes use a friendship template to try and manage. So they say, well, if I'm nice to you, you'll be nice to me and do what I say. So they use a friendship template. Or they'll use a family template to try and manage. And they use a paradigm or framework like, we'll run the firm like a big family. Well, once your employees get treated like family or get treated like friends, then the contract in their mind changes. It may not be a conscious change, but there's tremendous studies that show that once you use this model, it becomes a social contract, not a business contract. And once you have a social contract, then the relationship changes radically. So if you're looking at whether or not you have adopted an employee, the easiest way to judge that is, quite frankly, whether or not you're afraid to give them constructive criticism. If you're avoiding giving them constructive criticism, if you're doing things like this, and this is one of the things I hear all the time, well, Steve, I really would like to give so-and-so some constructive feedback, but you don't understand. She's going through a divorce right now. One of her kids is having a tough time, and, her mom's in a nursing home. And, I'm just, she's going through a really tough time, so I'm not going to do it. There's 2 things going on there. Number 1, you're paying them to work for you and take good care of your clients. If they can't act like a professional while they got everything that's going on in their life that's not totally working out, then you are probably not, you probably made a poor hire. You probably made a very poor hire. And if you can't rehabilitate that person, then you need to let them go, because they're not going to work out well for you. Number two, probably the truth is that you're afraid to do it and you're scared of the consequences. So a lot of lawyers won't correct bad performance inside the firm because they're afraid of, oh my God, what do I have to do? I have to go out and hire somebody, then I have to train them, and this person's okay, they're not great, but they're better than me going through the training and hiring process. That means you have a blind spot there. That means if you don't know how to recruit, hire, train, manage, and lead, your firm is going to hold at that revenue level, and your personal growth will hold at that revenue level. That's your blind spot. Look, the truth in life is you can't save everyone. You have to do your part as a leader and a manager to make your communicating, giving people feedback, but people aren't a good fit will reveal themselves. They'll just almost raise their hands. And you usually know when it's not a good fit and they're changed and it's not working well. It's up to you to really trust your intuition and protect your company, protect the good people from the bad. And if you think someone's a bad fit, as soon as you reasonably can, you need to have a direct and open conversation with them about this and get them on a goal to rehabilitate them, to improve. And here's the test for me. If they don't agree and commit to improving, and they say the problem's everywhere else in the room and not them, my recommendation at that point in time is take them right out back and shoot them. Be done with them. But if they commit, oh yeah, no, I'm going to improve, then you have to make sure that there's a follow-up conversation, an accountability structure. Whether you're doing it, your firm manager is doing it, there has to be a follow-up, probably 15 minutes to 30 minutes weekly for a period of time, typically 30, 60, 90 days to make sure whatever that behavior is shifts. If they don't change that behavior, take them out back. They got to go. Now, a lot of you are saying, well, that seems really harsh. Look, Mike was off on his math. I've been doing this in excess of 25 years. I've been involved probably in an excess of 1,000 conversations like this. I have no doubt, been actively involved in over 1,000, probably over 1,000 terminations. I'd have to do the math. I have personally been employing people since I was 19 years old, and Lord knows that's been 30 plus years of people working for me in some way, shape, or form. I just have to tell you this one thing that I've learned: if somebody doesn't, when they commit to improving their performance and they don't hold up their end of the deal, they'll never hold up their end of the deal. And you got to get them out as quickly and effectively as possible. Now, I don't care if you wait for 90 days until you find a better replacement, but if it's more than 90 days, it's too long, because what happens, the bad ones start to cause cancer, and the good ones look at you and realize that you will reward the bad ones, and you will not protect them. You will instead allow the bad ones to dump more work and more problems on the good ones. And that's how come, my partner, Sean McNallis, and Mark Powers in their brilliant book, Hire Slow, Fire Fast, say that once you realize what's going on, you've got to pull the trigger, you got to get them out. And you really don't want to put these conversations off. You want to act now so that there's no room for misunderstanding or confusion later on. This is the part of being a manager and leader that's really important to you. It's really funny to me. A lot of lawyers are total lions in the courtroom. If their clients are at stake, look out. They'll go to the wall. But when it comes to their practice, they turn into the biggest chickens on the planet and curl up in a fetal position on their desk, afraid to have really crucial conversations with their staff. So if you can't rehabilitate this bad person, they got to go, and that's unfortunately the truth about it. Now you can keep them as long as you want and continue to supplement them, but then don't complain to me or complain to our team that you're not getting the growth and growth that you expect. It's because you've got a bad person. It's like driving a car with a flat tire. 3 tires are working, one's flat. It's not going to go very fast. Great. Strategy 3, managing your staff to your expectation. Look, you have to start spending time to get clear about your expectations. So what are expectations for great performance? You know, you can't say, I'll know it when I see it, or what does this person do? Well, I'm not sure because he or she does so many things, or, you know, what if they quit, or what will my client say if they quit? You have to communicate to your team what are the expectations. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is by consistent performance reviews. And if you haven't done a lot, if you're with Atticus, you know, we've got a lot of tools on this. We probably have like 5 or 6 tools just on this particular topic alone, like how to review associates, how to review your team leader, how to review your key assistants. But if you're not with us and you don't have anything like that, here's a great place to start. Number 1, what are the 3 most important things they do for you and or your firm? Like, what is their role, and what are the 3 most important things? And it may take you a few minutes to really narrow it down. Number 2 is how can you measure their performance? So if you say these are the 3 most important things, how do you actually measure the performance? And they must be objective measurements, not subjective measurements. One of the trick ways of looking at this is if you were reporting to like a board of directors, or you had a CEO, or you had a boss to report to, and they said, how's this person doing? What would be the key performance indicators, the measurements that you would tell your boss? So for example, if you went to your boss and said, well, and your boss says, well, this person that you're managing, how they're doing, and you go, good, the boss will say something like, well, how do you know that's good? Well, that's a great question. So it might be, what's their revenue per month? It might be how many files they're moving per month. It might be, you know, some form of measurement of performance. And if it's true, you know, it's really powerful to design a bonus around those measurements if they can exceed that. Once again, we could probably do a half a day to 1 day conversation just around this particular topic. But if you're looking for mistakes and things that are holding the growth of your firm back, this is probably one of the biggest ones, not setting expectations and measuring expectations and giving consistent feedback around those expectations. Great. Mistake number 4. So there's a lot to say about this. One of the things that we really recommend in Atticus is if you're hiring someone, the 2 things that you need to be aware of is your personality assessment under the DISC, and we're big fans of the DISC profile, and the person that you're looking at hiring, what their assessment is under the DISC profile. So I'm just going to spend 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes kind of explaining this so I can give you context around this. In the DISC world, there's 4 predominant emotions or behavioral responses to how people would like the world to work. It could be a dominant one, which is also known as directive, influencing one, which is also relationships, steadiness or steadfastness, which is another one, and 4th, conscientious. And it's really important to understand where you're strong here, because what usually ends up is that you will, if you're really strong in one particular one, and let's just say, for example, that you're strong in a dominant profile, you're active, fast-paced, assertive, dynamic, you want the world to work really fast, and you love a challenge, you're going to be more inclined to hire people like that. And the problem with that is 3 or 4 people like that in the same firm are going to have a very exciting work environment, but they'll get nothing done because they're always going to be, you know, challenging each other and doing something. We need more of a balance. So if you're a high D, a dominant profile, we might support you with a strong C, conscientious legal assistant, maybe a strong CS legal assistant. And usually what happens is lawyers have a tendency to hire people, not people that are like them. And as a consequence, their firm is too strong in one particular area. So one of the things that you want to do is, it's almost counterintuitive, is that you want to hire people that aren't exactly like you so they can support your profile. Think of it like a football team or a sports team. You want to put together a team blended based on your profiles, not dominant in one profile. So if it's football, you won't really have a championship team if you have a team of all quarterbacks. You want to have different team players, have different profiles. So one of the ways that you can do this is to have a practice growth diagnostic with us, which will include the DISC profile so you can understand your DISC profile. And when you go to hire someone, you can work with your coach or whomever to look at what the profile needs to be to support you so that you have maximum freedom and really, quite frankly, to be the most effective that you possibly can based on your profile. Great. Number five. Mistake number five, not understanding when your employees are profitable. And this is, I think, probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see over and over and over. Look, if you're going to hire someone, you really want to know what is your profit target that you want them to produce inside your firm before you hire. So if you don't know that, then you'll just look at all of your employees as a cost, not an investment. And if you're running your firm well, you should have a really good rule of thumb or a good idea that if you invest into a type of producer or type of player or type of professional inside your firm, you should have a feeling of what that revenue they can generate will look like for you. So for example, if you're going to hire a paralegal and you're investing $50,000 in salary, and we're ignoring benefits and taxes and everything like this, but we're just using this as a rule of thumb, but the compensation is $50,000, then my anticipation is that you want to use what we call the rule of three, and it's just a benchmark. It's one that we think works really well, that the paralegal's target revenue for you should be $150,000 in production. So that means that paralegal should generate $150,000 inside your firm for you as, as a minimum for that paralegal to be profitable. So this is the rule of thumb. There's variations of this that will allow you to drive it down or drive it up depending on the type of practice, depending on what you're doing. But for our purposes for today's webinar, this is just a rule of thumb. Okay, so that doesn't mean that. So let me say it this way. So if you're looking to grow your firm and you're looking to produce profits that are not dependent on you, the ability to hire a key player inside your firm for growth purposes will include your capability or your ability to analyze how they make you money. And my recommendation, you'll hear it from most of our coaches and advisors, is that before you even start there, you have to figure out, how will this person make you money? And the rule of three is probably the most effective one that I can think of. Now, sometimes if you have a key assistant or legal assistant that won't actually produce revenue, and they might be playing as a support person, and they're supporting an associate or a partner, then I would probably anticipate that the partner should be used a rule of four. So here's my example. If the partner is making $100,000 a year and they've got a key support person who's non-billable, then I would expect my partner to be producing $400,000 in revenue, because I'm including, just as a rule of thumb, I'm including that person who is a non-producer key assistant to my partner. So if I'm looking at a firm and the firm's got 4 partners and they're doing $800,000 in production, I know, just as a rule of thumb, that we're probably at 50% under effective, and I can't figure, and I'll have to look at that and say, well, is it because they're not pricing well, are they not collecting well, are they not running the firm well, do we have underproducers? Because if I've got 4 partners with key assistants and the key assistants are not producing and they're doing 800,000 in production, they should be closer to 1.6, assuming that rule, so, or 1.2. Or whatever the case may be that you want to use that rule, you want to use the rule tool. But it really gives you just a real quick acid test for looking at how's this person doing, how's this person producing for the firm. So that's the rule of 3, and I just talked about a corollary to that is the rule of 4. But once again, the big mistake here is not being clear when you're hiring somebody what they will produce as far as revenue for the firm. If I've got a paralegal at 50,000 base, my target is 150, and how we came up with the rule of 3 is 50,000 for salary and comp, 50,000 towards overhead because you're going to have a lot of overhead towards that person, and $50,000 is a gross profit target. So a rule of 3 is 1/3 to the employee, 1/3 to overhead, 1/3 to the firm for net profit. And that's really what you're trying to derive out of that rule of 3. Great, so I don't want to spend too much more time on that one. I want to make sure we budget some time for questions, and obviously I like these topics because I'm diving into each one a little bit deeper than I probably should. So here is the most important recommendation or action. And I gave you a little bit of a preview on this at the beginning of the call. I want you to take at least one action out of the call. And I know it can be totally terrifying, and like I said, it's amazing to me. I see lawyers that are lions in the courtroom and chickens when it comes to managing. I know, been there, done that. I've seen it over and over again. I've been there myself. I've coached quite a few lawyers through it. Like we have probably 400 firms we're currently working with, and I promise you, with all the things that are going on, there's probably 50 conversations going on this month alone about whether someone should be terminated or whether someone should be hired. It's always going on. And your ability to move this forward is probably going to be one of the biggest leverage points for growth in your firm. So here's the thing that I'm going to recommend. I'm going to recommend that you write something down. I'm going to recommend that you write down what is the most important commitment or action I'm going to take out of this call. Now, I'm not going to say what you're going to think about. I'm not going to say what you're going to research. What action are you going to take? So I'm going to give you a second to write that down before I go to the next slide. So just go ahead and write it down. What's the most important action I'm going to take? And usually, this should be the one that's probably going to scare you the most. And it's the one that you probably need someone to hold you accountable to. This is one of the reasons we focus on accountability structures in our firm, inside our programs for law firms, because if you don't have someone holding you accountable, the odds of you making the change just won't happen. So in our experience, if there's no accountability, there'll be no change. If there's no change, there's no growth. So we have to have the accountability structure to support change, to support growth. So you want to write down what is the most important action that you're going to take. The 2 pieces of homework is, have you adopted someone on your team? What is your plan? Are you going to try and rehabilitate them? Or are you going to, as I jokingly said, take them out back and shoot them and move them on? You don't have to do it today, but you definitely want to commit to something around this in the next week. So what are you going to do with that person that you've adopted? So if you're with a coach, tell the coach about this. If you're in one of our programs, tell your coach in the program about it, or your resource advisor. If you don't have a coach, I'm going to ask that our client services team, whether it's Jeff, Larry, or Daniel, reach out to you, and they're going to ask you, have you adopted someone on your team? If so, what's your plan? And then number 2, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you rate your management skill? What is it? And what can you do to improve it? What can you do to improve your management skill? So some of you gave yourself a score at the beginning of the webinar. I'll give you the opportunity to reassess your score. So some of you might want to be downgrading it a little bit based after this webinar. Some of you might be upgrading it based on this webinar, but if you may want to adjust that. So when the client services team calls you, Larry, Jeff, or Daniel call you, give them your score. Let them know what it is, and let them know what your plan is to improve your score. Terrific. With that being said, if you're looking to improve your score and you're looking to improve your practice, probably the most easiest step and the smallest investment for you is to take what I mentioned earlier, which is a practice growth diagnostic. And this is, for those of you that are not working with us, the doorway into the Atticus community. And the practice growth diagnostic provides two key benefits. Number one, it gives you the opportunity to work with one of our practice advisors on ways to improve your cornerstone areas of client development, time management, marketing, I said that twice, staffing and cash flow. And then number two is the DISC assessment, and it's truly an advantage to understand your DISC. There's nothing quite as powerful as understanding how you prefer the world to work, so you can design your practice to support your strengths, not work against your strengths. Your investment for that is modest. It's $295. And it's typically going to be a 1-hour investment, and the easiest way to sign up is through the atticusadvantage.com/get started website. Now, those of you that are going to talk to the client services team, they can also arrange this for you. So you can absolutely have them assist you in that process should you want to do it. With that, I'm going to talk about one other slide or two, and then we're going to open up for any questions you may have. One of the things I want you to be careful about is not to fall for the 90-day Think About It program. I know it can be scary. I know failure can be very confronting. We know in our practices, winning and losing, for those of us that are litigators, is a nature, it's just the nature of the business. But we sometimes don't like to win or lose when it comes to running our practices. We don't like to take risk in running our practices. And there's nothing that's going to grow your top line or bottom line more than taking action versus thinking about it.